Come with us on a journey into the unknown, the unexplained, and the unbelievable. We will test your senses and challenge your beliefs. A world where science and religion clash. Or do they? You will meet real people and hear real stories, but you will not believe. You will witness strange sights and hear strange sounds, but you will not believe. This is the New England Ghost Project. Welcome to the nightmare.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the strange world of Ghost Chronicles. I am Ron Kolick, your host, the gatekeeper of the realm of the unknown, the unexplained, and the unbelievable, New England's own Van Helsing. And with me, my co-host, all the way from the land of the Red Dragon, the gold standard in ghost hunting, and a prolific author, Mr. Steve Parsons.
Good evening. Not on holiday anymore, unfortunately.
Oh, that's too bad.
It is, isn't it?
So I'm on the phone right now because evidently Skype's got uninstalled from my computer for some reason.
Can't help you there. Maybe just the Skype update needs doing because they happen. They come along in 2 a month.
Yeah, it's just amazing. It's just like it never. I don't know.
Yeah,
Anyway.
it's Skype for you. Ever since Facebook took over, it's not as good.
All right, so
Let's on with the show.
yes, absolutely. So anyway, I am. All right, so you have. I noticed on your Facebook page you have two new books out. I saw a duo, one purple, one blue.
Au contraire, no, only one new book out. The blue one is the one that came out in 2018, which is the General Guidance Notes for Investigators of Spontaneous Cases. It was published by the Society for Psychical Research. And that's the one that's like all of the basic steps for an investigation. So interviewing and research and all that sort of basic foundation stuff. There is a chapter on equipment, but it's not very in depth. It sort of just looks at the essential details. And welcome to Skype's, Ron. The new book, that's the one with the reddish coloured cover, was published. Well, it hasn't been published yet. It's available only from the Society for Psychical Research until the 2nd of August, when it's released worldwide on Amazon in two formats. It's printed and it's Kindle. Now, that one deals exclusively with equipment, hence the title, Using Equipment Guidance Notes for Investigators. And it is aimed at looking or giving guidance to all of those investigators who use gadgets, technology, equipment, from the humble cassette recorder right up to and including the Tesla automobile, incredibly enough, and smart technology, of course, and all of the things that so it's hopefully intended, again published by the Society for Psychical Research. And it came about because when the blue covered book, the General Guidance Notes, were first published and launched, when we were doing some of the launch events and webinars, there was a lot of questions pertaining to equipment. What should I buy? How should I use it? How should I interpret the results? And it dawned on me that we really need to address many of those questions, and this book is intended to address those questions. So it looks at the best sort of technology to buy, the best way to use the technology, to look after it, to care for it, to get the value for the money you've paid for it, and also to use the data and the information gathered to help your investigations in the best possible way. So it says you're on Skype. Or am I just talking to myself again? Anyway, the book, which was originally supposed to have come out last year, but of course lockdown got in the way of that, we gave me the opportunity to expand on it a little. And it turned from the planned 75 pages, which was really unfeasible, up to, I think it's 169 pages, because I didn't want to have to write it twice, or even, during the launch events, face more questions like, what do I do in this situation? What sort of piece of equipment should I use under these circumstances? And so I had the opportunity, because of lockdown, to make the book as comprehensive as I thought was possible, while still being small enough and concise enough.
Steve, can you give us a little taste of it, really? I mean, you threw a lot of stuff out there, but
Okay.
Like, give us a little taste of it. What for instance, do you have an excerpt from it you could actually read and can get an idea of what it's really like?
Bear with me for a second then.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm back on Skype, so I'm happy. So
yeah, it did say you were back, but
yeah.
All right, so we'll do the introduction. We'll read you an extract from the introduction.
Well, rather not. I'd rather have an actual.
Okay. Pick a subject. Then.
Anything you want, Steve, just so that people get an idea of what's in there. I mean, you talk about a lot of things, but actually hearing it, then they get a much better concept of it, Steve.
Okay.
If you don't.
Not at all. For example, this is an alternative method for, first one, the thing stopping on, because most EMF meters, as you're aware, have a single axis sensor. Mm-hmm. Although there are 3-axis sensors available, so it covers both. But this 10.1, aligning a single axis sensor. Whenever a single axis sensor is used, failing to properly align the sensor with the polarization of the electromagnetic field will cause the measurements to be significantly lower than the field's actual true intensity. The position of the sensor and the orientation of its measuring axis will normally be indicated somewhere on the body of the device or within the instruction manual. In many instances, especially at the commencement of the investigation, the polarization of the electromagnetic fields will not be known. In these circumstances, the following method can be used to align the sensor with the polarization of the field. It may also be useful if the investigator wishes to simply determine the polarization of a detected electromagnetic field. 1. Start by holding the meter away from the user's body, parallel to the floor with the display uppermost. Then, slowly rotate and tilt the meter approximately 90 degrees in every direction until the highest reading is observed. This indicates that the meter is closely aligned with the electromagnetic field. This alignment procedure will need to be repeated for every measurement.
Oh, wow.
To determine the maximum intensity of the field, it is then a simple matter of holding the meter in its new orientation whilst moving it forwards and backwards, side to side or up and down until the highest reading is seen. When no further increase in the electromagnetic level is observed, the measurement can be made and the measuring position noted. Investigators may also wish to note the polarization of the field on a plan or diagram of the area or location which they are examining. There we go.
Okay, so that gives people a little taste of
what. Yeah, and it's also a useful guide. Instead of just wandering around holding an EMF meter,
which most people do, by the way.
Yeah, which most people would do, and they may be misreading the field. They must be under-reading the field specifically. But by this very, it took me longer to say than it actually takes to do. Mm-hmm. But by doing that simple measure, which takes about 5 seconds, you can ensure that you have got the best, most accurate measurement.
See, a simple little thing that can be done. I mean,
dead simple. Yeah. Takes 5 seconds.
And where the sensors are so important on an EMF meter. Most people don't realize it. That they think they're holding it forward, they're picking up things forward, but the sensors are really off to the side, so that's where you're getting your readings from, not really from the front. And yet, they'll say, "Oh, right, look right in front of me." And no, not really. That's not what
Exactly. I mean, some designs actually have the sensor very close to the rear actually of the device, which means it's close to the user's hand.
Yeah.
Now, ordinarily, the position of the sensor, as I said, is marked on the device or somewhere in the instructions. And once you know the position of the sensor, then of course
I had a chuckle when you said that. You said the instruction booklet, and most you get so many of them have absolutely nothing with it. You get like a piece of paper, and here's your instructions.
Well, the chapter deals specifically with professional.
I know. But I had a laugh.
OEM ones, not ghost hunter grade ones that you buy from the ghost shop. But I'll just pull up one very quick one. This is looking at cameras and photography and digital cameras specifically, because there's a section on film cameras as well. And 15.3, the sensor. There are several factors relating to the sensor that investigators may wish to consider. Specifically, these are the size of the individual pixels, the number of pixels, and the overall size of the sensor. The size of the individual pixels is the most important part. Larger pixels have a greater light gathering ability, and consequently, the sensor's output requires less amplification and produces fewer image artifacts. The total number of pixels is less important. The more pixels can allow finer details to be recorded by the sensor, but can introduce image noise, which may obscure the additional detail. For any given number of pixels, sensors that are physically larger will always have bigger pixels and will always produce better quality pictures, especially in lower lighting conditions. Camera phones and many compact cameras typically use a small sensor, although an increasing number of compact cameras and DSLRs use sensors that are physically larger with correspondingly bigger pixels. And there are sections on, just bounce all the way back to the introduction. It starts off the usefulness of equipment, measurement, documenting and recording measurements, care and maintenance, battery
How many
care.
pages? How many pages, Steve?
169.
Good, solid.
Care and maintenance, date and time, temperature, measuring temperature, weather and local atmospheric conditions, electromagnetic fields using an EMF meter, sound recording, microphones, EVP, working with sound recordings, photography, video photography, working with photography and video, smartphones and tablet computers, spontaneous object movement, measuring other things, and additional resources. There we go.
Yeah, you get quite a bit.
It's because as I said, we do. It was going to be smaller, like the Blue Book is, so less pages. But lockdown gave me the opportunity to
expand.
Well, I didn't want to write it twice, as I said at the start.
Now, we see so often on these ghost hunting shows that people have different pieces of equipment, and a lot of them think that the more they pay for the equipment, the better it is for what they're doing. But in reality, for instance, let's take a look at the thermal imager. If you had a thermal imager, that was really something big, especially in the early days of ghost hunting. But to my knowledge, there's never really been a you have to say what a ghost is, but a ghost or spirit captured on a thermal imager.
No, you're absolutely right. There hasn't. In fact, that would there is no recorded instance anywhere of a ghost or paranormal event being definitively captured by any piece of equipment, be it a camera, with one possible exception, which I'll come to in a minute. We there are countless videos, there are innumerable photographs and sound recordings, but they on their own they actually demonstrate, because they're still open to many questions. Take for example one that's on the Parascience website, a very interesting set of what sound like footsteps being recorded, but only recorded, it was only a sound recording. Now, there is no way, I recorded them. I know that I was the only person there, but therein lies the problem. Because a sound recording is simply just that. It is a recording of a sound that actually took place, but it doesn't tell you anything about the cause of the sound that took place, whether it was somebody, a member of our team clumping round in hobnail boots, or somebody who worked there spooking us and spoofing us, or whether it was me, or whether it was a phantom. It's just a sound.
So likewise, there lies the problem, though, isn't that true?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's covered in the book. But I said there was one possible exception, and there is, and that comes under temperature, because there are several documented instances that go all the way back to seance room phenomena in the 1920s and 30s, right up to the present day, where thermometers have. And I'm not talking about cheap Chinese. I'm talking about calibrated industrial thermometers,
right,
that have recorded an anomalous change in the temperature. But importantly, that change in temperature was coincident with somebody independently reporting an unusual experience. And that's happened. There are about 12 or 15 documented examples of that. And in all of those, it is seemingly defying the laws of thermodynamics. And in fact, one that I experienced, the temperature inside of a building dropped to the temperature below the ambient outside air. The building had no air conditioning, and it dropped significantly below. It dropped 8 degrees in about as many minutes.
But here's the problem, Steve, is yes, you had that experience, and it is some type of phenomena, but to equate it as a ghost or a spirit or a demon is a stretch. I mean, we have no proof.
Of course, it's a stretch. And and in each of those, there was no claim made.
No, I'm not meaning that, but that's unfortunate, because that's what happens. People will get, even if they get a legitimate phenomena that cannot be explained scientifically, it's still, no evidence of a ghost, a spirit, or anything else.
Not. And that point is made several times in the book, that what you've captured is an interesting physical anomaly.
And we shouldn't discount it, by the way.
Oh, of course. It also says that as well. What you have is evidence of, if you've done it properly, you have material evidence of an unusual anomaly that shouldn't take place, or that you need to do further work to try and understand. Because sometimes it might appear on the surface to be very unusual, but then scratch down a few, spend a little time studying the phenomenon, exploring what took place, trying to replicate the event, investigate it, in other words. And you may find an answer, and often you will. But a lot of investigators fall down with that standard line, and we've seen it done on shows, and we've seen it on YouTube, and we've seen it in investigation reports. Yeah, they hear a noise, or they visually record something or see something, and they go, well, we can't explain it, therefore it must be paranormal. And that's a mistake. That's a big mistake.
And the interesting thing too is that, even some of this phenomena that we cannot explain cannot explain now. Sometimes in the future, if we get other examples of similar phenomena, we might be able to find an explanation for this particular phenomena or anomaly that occurs. In other words, we don't know the answer now, but in the future we may know the answer what this was exactly.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
we've seen that in the past. Things we believed all through our history as this, and we disproved them eventually into the future. Now I'm not trying to say that we're just trying to disprove the existence of spirits or the existence of ghosts or incidents of phenomena. It exists. People believe it exists, and that's the thing we're trying to explain, is trying to understand it and find out exactly what it is, rather than just to jump to a conclusion to one way or another.
Well, you're spot on. In fact, I was going to read before the introduction to the book, but you said you wanted some content. But I'm going to go back to the introduction of the book.
Okay, that's fine, Steve.
And just read you the opening two paragraphs. The first one is written in bold in a larger font, and it says, "The overwhelming majority of the evidence relating to cases of haunting and the appearance of ghosts, apparitions, and poltergeist phenomena exists in the form of personal testimony and the accounts of witnesses. It is a fact that to date, no device or item of equipment has yet demonstrated the reality of these or any similar phenomena. Some readers might think it is strange to introduce these guidance notes with such a statement, but any discourse relating to the use of equipment for investigating instances of haunting or the manifesting of poltergeists and ghosts must consider this reality. Does this mean that using equipment for making measurements and gathering data when investigating such cases is a futile endeavour, driven only by hope, belief, and wishful thinking? The answer must be an emphatic no. The use of equipment has allowed investigators to examine, measure, and record in the minutest of detail the environment in places where these phenomena are reported. Careful measurements and observations have been used to test the claims and the reports of witnesses, and in many instances, the use of equipment has assisted the investigator to determine the cause of an event or reported experience." So that's just the opening pair of paragraphs from the introduction. So I think it sets the tone, and emphasizes and reinforces what you just said, that the equipment is assistive. It is not often demonstrative, diagnostic. It's just one of the tools that we use as investigators to help us. The biggest problem with using equipment is people, and you see this so often, and it's one of the reasons why many years ago, 20 years ago, when we were first playing around with those cheap CCTV camera baby monitor systems, we removed all the screens. Our base point, or our whatever the command post or base room has no video screens. There are no video screens out in the field. All the camera have their screens off or closed, because what we found was people don't look around them anymore. They watch the screen.
That makes sense. Yeah.
They become fixated by this little glowing rectangle in front of them, and they don't observe anymore. And there was one, it came to a head after, because we, like everybody else, we set everything up, and we had banks of monitors so we could watch the output from the cameras.
Right.
And we were at the boat museum in Ellesmere Port, which is on the banks of the Mersey, and it was a canal boat museum. So it dealt with Britain's industrial heritage, and we transported goods everywhere by canal. And the building had a very good reputation, and we had spent nearly a year there. And on this particular night, we'd set up as per normal. Now, there wasn't a base room in this location, so it was essentially kind of think of a music concert where you have the sound mixer desk. And so we'd set up the bass position kind of like that, so about a quarter of the way down from one end, and pretty centrally between the sides. And we had a number of observers in pairs throughout the area we were in, and there was 2 located behind us whose job was to sort of watch that part of the building. Anyway, after about a half hour, there was some commotion, and the 2 investigators behind the base point got up and ran forward past the base point into the main body of the room. And there was some commotion about all this, and we called a halt to the proceedings because it had been quite disruptive. And we asked them, well, what happened? What did you see? Oh, well, we were watching the screen. Now, this was the screen at the base point, about 10 feet in front of them. And we saw some movement. So we ran forward to investigate. I said, which screen was it you saw the movement on? And they pointed at the screen. I went, that's the screen that's got the camera that's pointing behind me. In other words, you were watching yourself on a camera.
Yep.
So, they were jigging about, and then they noticed that, and so they were jigging about some more, and then so that was the point after which we never deployed a monitoring field again.
Okay. We're coming up to the break, but I have to tell you one funny thing that actually happened to me at the Red Light Seance. I was setting up the cameras, Levino, the good cameras, and, you go back and forth. You have to check make sure the alignment's good and everything you can see. So anyways, and so I went back and I looked and I saw a figure by the door. And it was moving, and I went and looked. Of course, there was nobody around, but I clearly saw it, and we have it on footage, of course, because it's recorded. So Jim went through the whole thing, and there's a delay in the camera, so it was actually me, and it was by the door because that's where it picked up the tail end just as I was there. So it does happen.
Exactly the same things happened to me.
Yeah, so it does happen. But we got to take a break. You're listening to Ghost Chronicles International. Steve Parsons, Ron Kolick, right here on TogiNet and Pararex. TogiNet and Pararex. We'll be right back after the following messages.
Welcome to TogiNet, radio with a cutting edge.
Do you have a paranormal event, book, or something else you want people to know about? Then why not advertise it on Ghost Chronicles Radio? With over 150,000 downloads a month, get your message out to an audience that's interested in the subject. We have a plan at a cost that fits your needs. For more information, contact Ron Kolick at anyghostproject@comcast.net or call 978-455-6678.
They're creepy and they're kooky, mysterious and spooky. They all talk gobbledygooky, the Parax family. The shows are paranormal, not stuffy but informal. The topics are abnormal, the Parax family.
They're strange, deranged, unrestrained.
So grab your favorite brew, it's time to rendezvous as we give awards to the Parax family.
Back to part 2 of Ghost Chronicles International Edition. Sorry about the false start, but the music stopped in my ear, so I thought we'd started, so I started.
It stopped in mine, too.
Yeah, so there we go. These
that
things
was
are
funny.
sent to try us. I'm your host, New England's own Van Helsing, and the gold standard in ghost hunting, talking equipment and equipment faux pas and stuff.
Well, I want to move on from that because there was something I wanted to cover a couple of weeks ago and never got to it. But I do want to mention something too about skeptics, or
I
guess
love skeptics. I couldn't eat a whole one though.
whatever they are. Anyways, those people that say there's no such thing and they're paranormal and they have an explanation for everything. The problem is their explanations are based on theories at times.
Did your cuckoo clock just sound at the most
Yes,
perfect time then?
It amazes me that you guys can actually hear that thing. It's in
No,
the
it was
other.
when you said their explanations are ooh, ooh.
But I mean, it amazes me you can hear that because there's a TV right in front of my wife is watching TV, but the cuckoo clock, you can hear, the TV you can't. That's amazing. Anyway, so they take one thing and they say, okay, this is evidence that what occurred here, this is what occurred here. Not that this is possibly what occurred there, but this is what occurred here. In other words, that's it. There's no gray. It's just black and white to them. Do you agree with that concept?
Well, what they do, is they look at one very small part of the overall picture, and they focus on that very small part, and they work hard to debunk that. And there often are, there's a lot of unknowns in an investigation, and sometimes investigators make genuine mistakes or misreport.
As I just mentioned before the break. Yeah.
Now, for example, people will have heard of the Enfield poltergeist, and in on one notable occasion, one of the girls tried to spoof the investigators. She and her sister were in the kitchen, and they threw an object. They were immediately caught, and questioned by Guy Playfair, who said, "Why did you do it? And did you do it?" And the girl said, "Yeah, we did it. Fair cop." But we're just fed up of these people coming around to our house night after night after night, month after month after month, and we just thought if we gave them something, they would go away and we'd be happy. Now, a lot of the skeptics have focused on that one event and ignored many of the events that took place when the girls weren't there, or in the presence of multiple witnesses, where the girls clearly were in no position to perpetrate such an event, and they dismissed the entirety of the experiences that took place there as simply the actions of two of the girls. And that's just wrong. But that's how they do it. They only need to disprove one tiny element of it in order to, they believe, bring the whole house of cards tumbling down. Right. And experienced investigators will realise that in those circumstances, in those situations, what the girls actually did wasn't helpful, but it was perfectly understandable, right, as was their explanation. These people, you are dealing with humans, and you're dealing with chaotic situations where the investigator often doesn't have 100% total control. It's not a laboratory experiment. And people will occasionally do unpredictable things.
Right. It's intriguing is why we do it, but unfortunately there are people on both sides of the fence who really hurt the field more than
there's nothing worse than the skeptics criticize the believers and vice versa, and you see it on, we have these Facebook groups over here, and undoubtedly in America too, that like UK Paranormal and Hauntings and Paranormal Phenomena is another one over here, and people go on and they tell their stories. And there was a post only there the other day saying, well, if you don't believe, why are you here? They only welcome people with one mindset, and the skeptics are exactly the same. They are equally as bad. They have a very fixed, very polarized opinion. One notable British scientist said that people who investigate or even bother looking for ghosts are knobbers, which is quite quite a derogatory term, both
Yeah.
sides of the Atlantic, I would imagine. And yet he's a professor of
know what it means.
yeah, he's a professor of astrophysics,
Mhm.
with a very closed mind.
Right. But I mean, it's a shame the way it is. But anyway, so I did want to bring up another subject before I wanted to bring this up a while ago, and that's the old Edison Tesla thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like the believers and the non-believers. It's Tesla is the one who invented everything, and Edison stole everything from him, and it goes on and on like that. But people don't they don't understand the true dynamics of what happened between the two of them, and so
Well, for a
forth.
start off, I mean, Edison employed Tesla, gave him a job,
Exactly.
and recognized his talent. From the off, and employed him. What is undeniably true is that Tesla was a great inventor, but he was a terrible businessman. And Edison was a very, very head screwed on businessman, very, very astute. And
He was a good inventor too, by the way. Just to get
he
that
was
in.
a good inventor, yeah. There's no doubt about that. But he was also very, very fast off the mark, patenting things.
Right.
And kind of like Apple, Apple don't really invent very much. What they do is they take an idea or a concept and they develop it into a usable format. But they don't invent the technology, but they invent a new way, a better way, a more user-friendly way.
Exactly. For instance,
And that's what Edison did. And there was that famous the wars of the current between the two of them that led to the electrocution of an elephant and the invention of the electric chair.
The interesting thing about that, Steve, is that Tesla came up with that working for Edison, but Edison poo-pooed it. He was the one, and that's why they split up. If Edison had adopted the AC current thing, then more than likely Tesla, we would never have this word about Tesla. We probably wouldn't even know who he is, because he'd still be an employee of Edison, and Edison, of course, would be putting patents out on this and that. But because they split up over this AC current thing, that's why we heard of Tesla first of all. And I mean, it's they were both great men in their own their own minds. That's true too, but their own right.
They were also immensely throughout their lives. They had many disagreements and they had many battles. Notably, the war of the current, as it was called, ACD, alternating current and direct current, was. But they also admired each other tremendously. They both recognized the genius of the other. There's
Edison
no doubt
would never employ Tesla if he didn't.
Exactly. And throughout their latter years, they both several times said or commented on the genius of the other. So, but I think the issue with Tesla is that most of, and he says this himself in his own writings, that he could visualize things. He wasn't always correct.
Right.
Like the Warden, I can't remember the name of it. Wardenstock Tower.
Yes.
Yeah. Although he was a genius. Geniuses, are not always 100% right. But he had these ideas, these concepts inside of his head, and didn't necessarily write everything down.
Right. He could visualize them.
I
do the same thing, Stephen. When in building things in my house and everything else, I visualize it first, and that's where I go from. Then I put it together. Some people can do that, but that it does hurt you, but it does help you too. So it's
I mean, it allowed him to work, but it also meant that we don't have a record. Plus, of course, after he died in the hotel in New York, it is said that the FBI removed and hid away many of his manuscripts, so we don't have a complete record. Now that story is partially true, and to the extent to which anything has disappeared, we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know whether they took everything, some, none, whether they simply lost it through ineptitude, or whether they it's locked in a vault with the Holy Grail in the next container along. We just don't know, and so that's opened up that opens up the door to conspiracy theorists.
Oh, God, yeah.
And all manner of weird, strange ideas that Tesla was doing this, that, and the other, and he was communicating with aliens, or he was communicating with the dead.
Well, he thought he was originally.
Both of them at different times were asked about, and their answers were quite or have been taken sometimes out of context, or sometimes because what they said wasn't absolutely definitive. Edison said regarding spirit communications that if such a thing were possible, then radio would seem
I am actually going to go into that, Steve, because I have a transcript of an article he did with Forbes magazine.
Yeah.
And there's some interesting facts in here that people, I don't think, truly understand his concepts of it. But yeah, okay. I agree with you. So why don't I go into that since you introduce it? So this is an article that he wrote. Well, he didn't write, but an interview he did with Forbes magazine. And of course, the most famous thing, everybody talks about the Spiricon, the famous Edison Spiricon and the mysterious plans that supposedly happened and whatever. Anyways, so an exclusive article brought to light a bizarre new device the 73-year-old Edison had apparently been working on, a spirit phone that would let the living communicate with the dead. This is Edison's words now. I have been at work for some time building an apparatus to see if it is possible for personalities which have left this earth to communicate with us, Edison told Forbes. If this is ever accomplished, it will be accomplished not by any occult, mystifying, mysterious, or weird means such as are employed by so-called mediums, but through scientific methods. Then, as now, the existence of the afterlife, of course, was a big debated thing. So this is Edison's thought on the afterlife. Edison's own belief allowed for both faith and science. I can no more doubt the existence of an intelligence that is running things, God, he told Forbes, than I do in existence of myself, he added, with absolute positiveness that some of our most generally accepted notions on the subject are utterly unattainable and ridiculous. Edison believed that all living bodies are composed of myriads and myriads of infinitesimal small individuals, each in itself a unit of life, and that these and those units which work in swarms were everlasting. So this is basically what he's talking about a consciousness, right? Is that what you get out of that?
Yeah. But...
Okay. He goes on to say, when the person dies, Edison asserted, the swarms would take form elsewhere, going on to function in some other environment or vessel. Certain swarms, he theorized, this is all theories according to Edison, did most of the thinking and directing, much like bosses do or leaders do among humans. This theory would account for the fact that certain men and women have greater intellectuality, greater abilities, greater powers than others, he explained in the Forbes article. It would account for the differences in moral character with the movement of the swarms behind changes in a person's personality in the course of his lifetime. So what do you think of that?
Well, there's quite a bit to unpack.
Quite
there.
a bit there. Yeah, there is.
Because I mean, at one level, he's actually talking, or it could be interpreted, he's talking about something which we understand today, only just coming to terms with understanding today, and that is of course the quantum mechanics, where we are indeed comprised of an infinitesimal number of myriad swarms of I suppose they would be independent. And when we do cease to exist as a living individual, then these things, they don't change state. They don't go away. The carbon molecules that comprise our skin, the hydrogen atoms that comprise us, the calcium ions and atoms, they all go back into the environment and become something else. Trees and plants and soil, and the idea of consciousness, which he also talks about there, is something which wasn't even a new concept for Edison, because you have this idea of the Akashic record of a universal consciousness in many early religions. It's part of some of the it's the backbone of theosophy, of Swedenborgism, of Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, whereby we are just in effect ants in a colony controlled by a hive mind, and that we dip in and out of our brain is simply a microprocessor. But the memory, the RAM for this computer we call life and the universe is somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And what Edison has done, I mean, he's talking a century ago, when some of these things hadn't been discovered, or they were being theorized, they were being theorized about. Atomic physics was becoming well understood. It was only a couple of decades later that they harnessed the atom. Rutherford, only 10 years later, 20 years later, had actually split the atom. So there was an understanding at some level, but like all good scientists, what Edison is doing is taking what is known and conceptualizing it. Here in the UK, we have people who are employed, they're called futurologists. And they're employed by many large companies to try and think about the world in 50 years or 100 years, think about the technology and think about what people will be doing and what they'll be needing and how they will be using it. And like futurologists, scientists also are thinking about the results of previous experiments. They're conceptualizing based upon the information that they have. What does it mean? How can this be understood? How can it be interpreted? And what I take from what Edison said is that he is a darn good scientist doing what darn good scientists should do, which is think about the problem, try to analyze it, try to define ways of, and he said at the start of the interview, he has been looking at methods. He's been building pieces of equipment to test ideas, rather like investigators testing ideas.
And it goes on to talk a little bit about his electric ghost machine, as it's called. And if successful, Edison's electric ghost machine would be able to detect the personalities of the deceased, allowing them to relay messages from the spirit realm. If the unit, and this is Edison's words now, if the units of life which compose an individual's memory can hold together after death, Edison reasoned, it is not within range of possibility to say at least that these memory swarms could retain the powers they formerly possess, and thus retain what we individual's individual's personality after the dissolution of the body. If so, then the individual's memory or personality ought to be able to function as before. I am hopeful, he continued, that by providing the right kind of instrument to be operated by this personality, we can provide intelligent messages from it in its changed habitat or environment. If this apparatus I am constructing should provide a channel for the inflow of knowledge from an unknown world, a form of existence different from this form of life, we may be brought in an important step nearer to the foundation of all knowledge, nearer the intelligence which directs us all. So that's basically what he said in this article.
And the big problem is, of course, there are no plans remaining for whatever he was working on. But they don't exist. So
here, though, to me he's actually saying it's not us who's going to operate the equipment. It will be the personality from the other side, or the intelligence from the other side.
Well, it's opened the door to many. I mean, particularly with EVP, you had Meek and his with Spiricom, and over here we had Scammell and others. And there are many EVP researchers who have claimed down the years that the piece of equipment that they're building or designing, or that the plans for which were supplied by Edison or the spirit world. But Edison's name features in a lot of these ideas. You know, they say that they a medium, which Edison was deeply critical of, was used to provide the plans for a device to get rid of mediums. It's kind of like turkeys voting for Christmas. But nonetheless, that's what they claim. The big problem, of course, with Edison, and where the door has been kicked wide open for the conspiracy theorists, is that there are no plans. The archives have been searched, and they've been comprehensively looked through, picked over, and studied, and there is simply no evidence that he actually built the device. And what Edison may have been doing there is, and Edison had done it previously, had a tracker. Remember, the guy was a very astute businessman, very good at self-publicity. So we don't actually know whether because although he says, I am working on, he doesn't say, I have built. You know,
no, he doesn't say that at all, Steve. Which is
so we don't know whether I am working on means I am sitting in a comfortable chair with a packet of biscuits, cookies, and a cup of tea,
and
thinking about it, because it means the same thing. You know, I'm working on ideas for a new book. That doesn't mean to say that you're hastily scribbling bits of paper on the bedside table, or tapping away the computer keyboard, but you're still working on an idea. And Edison uses the word working on. Some people have interpreted it as he's in his laboratory. His biographers actually say that during that period of his life, he didn't appear to be actively in the because by then, of course, Edison was controlling several multi-million-dollar companies, and was preoccupied with the day-to-day running of companies. He didn't spend his time in a Victorian mansion with a laboratory in the basement, with jars of bubbling liquids and wires and flashing, electricity. In fact, Tesla did actually. And
Westinghouse saw that.
And lots of pigeons. So we don't actually know the truth of it, but we can interpret Edison's words in different ways.
Right. Now, I before I forget, and I know we're getting towards the end of the show, I want to give a shout out to Leigh Scott. He says this is his favorite podcast. So
thank you very much.
So I want to give a shout out to Leigh Scott, and thank you so much. And we want to thank all our patrons on Ghost Chronicle Radio who help support this show financially as well, which is good. By joining Patreon, they get special materials they can only see on as Patreon subscribers and members of the Dead Air Society, as we like to call it. But anyways, I want to make sure I got that in. I meant to do that earlier. So, all right. Yeah, there we go. We're getting to the bell. So anyways, we're coming up on the end of the show, and the second hour of Ghost Chronicles is going to be coming up next right here on TogiNet and Pararex Radio. And believe it or not, it's going to be Steve and I again.
How on earth did that happen?
I don't know. It's because the end's out in Hosneck Beach again or something or other.
Yeah, I want to know something. I mean, how bad is your American telephone network? Because I was on vacation last week and I still managed.
I know.
I know.
You're a
I
trooper.
know.
Yeah.
I stood there on that misty pathway looking for ghosts.
By the way, did you see it?
No.
Oh, damn.
And do you know what? Like a good investigator, I was there for 6 nights and I did it 6 nights. It wasn't just for the show.
Right.
Didn't see anything.
Yeah. Had nothing to do with the pub across the street, right?
No, nothing to do with the pub across the street. But I just lucked out.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you saw my post. I am going to UK. I've decided in my mind. It's in my brain. I am going.
Mm-hmm.
Now I just got to start put the bucks away to cover all this mess. Of course, I have to wait for the virus to clear itself up.
Well,
as well.
as of next Monday, the UK are allowing in US citizens who've been double vaccinated.
Are they?
Yeah, then America won't allow the Brits in, but Britain will allow the Americans in. So
sweet.
And of course, you do have that awful 8-hour each way flight.
Maybe not.
What are you gonna do?
I
Swim?
take the new supersonic jet. Be there in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyways, we got to
Mr. Bezos.
Yeah. We got to go. Yeah, I could go up in the spaceship. Who knows? Anyways, we got to go. Stay tuned for the second hour when Steve and I will be back, and I'm sure we'll come up with something else to talk about.
We'll have to promote the book all over again.
Oh God, please no.
Different audience. I've got to do it tomorrow. Well, sorry, tonight.
It's a good book. Buy the book. All right.
Buy the damn thing.
Yeah. Good night. God bless. See you in a bit.
From goalies to ghosties, long-leggedy beasties, and things that go bump in the night. Deliver us, good Lord.